Welcome to my channel. Don't forget to subscribe.
He said, "Stop acting like we're married. You don't get a say in where I go or who I'm with." Everyone laughed. I just smiled and stayed quiet. But when he came back from his guy's weekend, his key didn't work, and the neighbor told him exactly why. My ex-boyfriend Dean and I had a fundamental disagreement about the nature of reality. No, seriously. I'm not being dramatic. I believe that if you live in someone's house, eat their food, and use their Wi-Fi, you are in a partnership. A team. You're in it together. Dean, on the other hand, Dean believed he was a celestial body, a blazing sun, and I was just a small, insignificant planet caught in his gravitational pull. We'd been together for 2 years, and for the last 6 months of it, he'd been living in my house. And when I say my house, I mean my house. My name is on the mortgage, my name is on the utility bills, and my name is on the bank statements that show my salary as a graphic designer is what pays for all of it. The down payment for this place came from a small inheritance my grandmother left me. This house, it's not just wood and drywall to me. It's her legacy. It's my sanctuary. Or at least, it was supposed to be. Dean moved in bit by bit. It wasn't a conversation, really. It started with a toothbrush. Then a drawer. Then one weekend he brought a duffel bag, and it just never left. At first, it felt nice. Cozy. I'd come home from a long day of deadlines and he'd be there, on the couch, playing his video games. It was a presence. I mistook that presence for partnership. The truth is, I'm a pretty easygoing person. I like my quiet life. I work from home, I have a couple of really good friends who I've known since high school, and my idea of a wild Friday night is trying a new brand of frozen pizza and watching a British mystery show. I like things calm. Predictable. Dean was not like that. His life was a performance, and his audience was his 3 best friends, a cackling Greek chorus I privately referred to as the Brothers. Their names were Sterling, Russell, and Clayton. Sterling was the loud one, the alpha of their little pack. Russell was the quiet one who just smirked at everything, and Clayton just seemed to go along with whatever the other 2 did. They were Dean's whole world. And slowly, they started to become a permanent fixture in mine, too. I started to feel like a stranger in my own home. My quiet sanctuary became their weekend clubhouse. The little plaque by the door, the one Dean had bought me early on, said the Wilsons. He thought it was a cute, romantic gesture at the time. But looking at it lately, as the sound of their video games and shouting echoed through the halls, it just seemed wildly, painfully optimistic. It was a promise of a life we weren't actually building. We were just coexisting. And I was the one paying for it all. The cracks were starting to show, and I was the only one who seemed to notice them. Living with Dean was one thing. Living with Dean and the brothers was another thing entirely. It felt like I had 3 extra, non-paying roommates I never signed up for. My home, my beautiful, calm space that I had worked so hard for, became their default hangout spot. I remember one Sunday afternoon in particular. I had spent all morning doing a deep clean. The floors were shining, I had fresh flowers on the coffee table, and the whole house smelled like lemon polish. I was looking forward to a quiet evening, maybe reading a book. I had just settled onto the couch when I heard the key in the lock. It was Dean. And with him were Sterling, Russell, and Clayton, carrying cases of beer and 3 large pizzas. "Babe, the game's on." "Sterling's TV is busted, so we're watching it here," Dean announced, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. He didn't ask. He just informed me. For the next 4 hours, my living room was a war zone. The shouting at the screen was deafening. I could hear it from my office upstairs, even with the door closed. When I finally came down after the game was over, the scene was devastating. Pizza boxes were stacked on my beautiful coffee table, leaving grease stains on the wood. There were empty beer bottles everywhere. Someone had spilled a sticky, dark soda on the new rug I'd just bought after my last promotion. And they were all gone. Dean and the brothers had vanished, leaving the carnage behind for me. I spent the next hour cleaning up, my hands shaking with a quiet rage. When Dean finally came home later that night, smelling like cheap beer and stale smoke, I tried to talk to him about it. I was calm. I was reasonable. Dean, I started, gesturing to the now clean living room. I love that you have your friends, I do. But this is my home, too. I can't be the one constantly cleaning up these huge messes. Could you maybe ask them to be a little more careful? Or maybe you guys could pitch in to clean up afterward? He just looked at me, a blank expression on his face. Then he let out a short, dismissive laugh. Val, babe, come on. They're just guys. It's what we do. It's just a little mess, what's the big deal? What's the big deal? The big deal was that I felt my home slipping away from me. The big deal was that I felt more like a live-in maid than a partner. The big deal was the complete and utter lack of respect. I didn't say any of that, though. I just stood there, watching him kick off his shoes and leave them in the middle of the hallway for me to trip over later. That night, I went to bed feeling a deep, chilling loneliness, even with him lying right next to me. The space between us in the bed felt like a canyon. And I just knew, that something had to give. The breaking point, the moment that changed everything, came on a Thursday evening. The week had been stressful. I was on a tight deadline for a big project, working late every night. I was exhausted. All I wanted was a quiet weekend to recharge my batteries. I was in the kitchen, making pasta sauce from scratch, the way my grandmother taught me. The smell of garlic and basil filled the air. It was my little ritual, my way of de-stressing. That's when Dean waltzed into the kitchen, already dressed to go out. He was holding his phone pressed to his ear, a wide grin on his face. He was in the middle of a loud, one-sided conversation with, you guessed it, the brothers. Oh my God, yes, I am so in, he said into the phone, his voice booming in the small kitchen. A guy's weekend away is exactly what I need. A beat. No, she's not coming. Don't be ridiculous. He hung up and looked at me, his face beaming as if he'd just announced he'd won the lottery. Good news, he said. The guys and I are going to a cabin at the lake for the weekend. Leaving tomorrow. This was the first I was hearing of it. Not a discussion. Not a question. A declaration. I just stood there, stirring the sauce, the wooden spoon feeling heavy in my hand. I tried to keep my voice even. I tried to be the cool, understanding girlfriend. Oh. Okay, I said. Sounds fun. Then I asked the question. The simple, logistical question that a normal person in a normal relationship might ask. Which lake are you all heading to? Dean looked at me as if I had just asked him to explain quantum physics in ancient Greek. He let out a short, sharp laugh. Just then, Sterling walked in through the back door without knocking, as he always did. Dean turned to him, a look of pure mockery on his face. Can you believe her? He said, rolling his eyes. She wants to know where I'm going. Sterling scoffed, looking me up and down like I was a piece of furniture he was considering throwing out. The heat rose in my cheeks. It was happening right here, in my kitchen, with the smell of my grandmother's sauce in the air. Dean then turned back to me, put his hands on his hips, and delivered the line. The line that would echo in my head for days. The line that would become the catalyst for everything that came after. He said, his voice dripping with condescension, stop acting like we're married. You don't get a say in where I go or who I'm with. And then, they laughed. All of them. Russell and Clayton had appeared in the doorway behind Sterling. The three of them, my boyfriend's best friends, stood in my kitchen and laughed at me. It was a symphony of derision. They genuinely thought this was the peak of comedy. A woman, in her own home, being told she has no right to ask a simple question about her live-in boyfriend's plans. Hilarious. I just stood there, holding the wooden spoon, watching a drop of red pasta sauce fall onto my clean floor. And I didn't get mad. I didn't argue. Something strange happened in that moment. A zen-like calm washed over me. It was like a switch flipped in my brain. The part of me that had been trying so hard to make this relationship work, the part that made excuses for him, that cleaned up his messes, that bit her tongue to keep the peace, she just quietly packed her tiny bags, put on a tiny hat, and walked right out of the building. She was done. She had retired. I looked at Dean's smug, smiling face, the face I used to think I loved, and I just smiled back. A big, friendly, completely empty smile. "You know what?" I said, my voice full of a cheerful agreement that seemed to surprise even me. "You are 100% correct. My mistake." They all laughed again, louder this time, thinking I was just backing down, admitting defeat. Dean gave me a condescending little pat on the cheek, a gesture meant to placate a child, not a partner. And then they all swept out of the house, off to some pre-weekend away cocktail hour, leaving me alone in the sudden silence. I stood in the kitchen for a long moment, the only sound the gentle bubbling of the sauce on the stove. I turned off the burner. I wasn't hungry anymore. I walked through the house, my house. I saw his jacket thrown over a chair. His pile of video games by the TV. His shoes kicked off by the door. And I didn't feel angry anymore. I just felt clear. "Okay," I said to the empty room. My voice was steady. "Not married. No say." A new, much more interesting plan was beginning to form in my mind, a plan that felt like a sunrise after a long, dark night. "Got it," I whispered. The weekend was going to be fun after all. Just not for him. I went to bed early that night. I slept more soundly than I had in months. The decision had been made for me, by him. And all I had to do was agree. The weight I didn't even realize I'd been carrying was suddenly gone. I was about to take my life back. And I was going to start first thing in the morning. The moment Dean's oversized pickup truck, presumably packed with 5 different types of beef jerky and a case of cheap beer, disappeared down the street on Friday afternoon, I sprang into action. But my first move wasn't packing or cleaning. It was a mission of strategic importance. I walked next door. My neighbor is a gentleman named Mr. Henderson. He's a widower in his late 70s, a retired high school drama teacher with a twinkle in his eye and a prize-winning collection of garden gnomes. He and his late wife, Eleanor, had been married for 51 years. After she passed away a few years ago after a long illness, I made a habit of checking in on him, bringing him cookies, or just sitting on his porch with him to chat. He told me once about his own parents' messy divorce when he was a child, and how it taught him the importance of respect in a relationship. He was a kind soul, but he also had a surveillance network that would make the CIA jealous. Nothing happened on our street without Mr. Henderson knowing about it. I brought him a small plate of the chocolate chip cookies he likes and sat with him on his porch swing. "Mr. Henderson," I said after we had discussed the weather and the moral failings of the neighborhood squirrels. "I have a bit of a situation, and I need your help. It involves a small bit of theater." His eyes lit up. The man loved drama more than he loved his gnomes. I explained what had happened. I told him Dean's exact words. "Stop acting like we're married." I didn't have to embellish. The unvarnished truth was damning enough. By the time I finished, Mr. Henderson was patting my hand, a look of righteous fury on his gentle face. "That shameless young man," he declared, his voice taking on the baritone of a stage actor. "Living under your roof, eating your food, and speaking to you with such disrespect. Don't you worry, Valerie, my dear. You leave it to me." "What's my line?" I gave him a simple script. When Dean returned and inevitably found himself locked out, he was to act confused and deliver a few key pieces of information. Mr. Henderson took to the task with the enthusiasm of a seasoned Broadway actor preparing for opening night. He even took notes on a little pad of paper. Let's see. Found his freedom. A man's home now. Oh, this is delicious, my dear. Simply delicious. With my accomplice secured, I returned home, a real smile on my face for the first time in weeks. It was time to begin what I called Operation Reclaim My Space. My house, for the last 6 months, had been a sea of masculine clutter, pointless sports memorabilia, and art that looked like it belonged in a sterile doctor's office. It was time to bring my territory back. It was time for a resurrection. I didn't just pack Dean's things. I curated them. I went to the hardware store and bought a dozen sturdy packing boxes and a thick black marker. This wasn't just about cleaning, it was about reclaiming every square inch of my life. It was a ceremony. I started in the bathroom. The half-empty bottle of that musky cologne he loved went into a box first. Then his electric razor, his mountain of hair products. I labeled that box, face gels and various goops. The bedroom was next. His side of the closet was an explosion of wrinkled t-shirts and jeans. I didn't fold them. I just scooped them up in armfuls and stuffed them into boxes. The first box was labeled Everyday Clothes, Various Stains. The next one held his collection of fancy, wildly expensive sneakers, shoes he could afford but apparently rent he could not. I labeled it, A Podiatrist's Nightmare. My personal favorite was the box for his endless collection of baseball caps that all looked exactly the same. That one got the label, Magic Sparkly Hats That Shed Disappointment on Everything I Own. Okay, maybe I tweaked the original label from the story I heard, but it felt right. I worked my way through the house like a storm of cleansing energy. The living room was the biggest challenge. His video game console, the collection of 50 games, the confusing mess of controllers and wires, all of it went into a box labeled Toys for a Grown Man. His stack of depressing, gray and black throw pillows he'd insisted on buying for my couch went into a box labeled Sad Beige Things. By Saturday morning, every trace of his physical existence was boxed up and stacked neatly by the front door. It was a mountain of cardboard, a monument to a relationship that had run its course. I'd hired a couple of guys from a moving app, and they arrived right on time. They were professional, efficient, and didn't ask a single question as they loaded everything into their truck. We took it all to a 10 by 5 foot storage unit a few miles away. I paid for 1 month in advance. A generous, non-marital gesture, I thought. As I drove away from the storage facility, leaving his entire material life behind a locked metal door, I felt light. The car felt lighter. The air felt cleaner. The sun seemed brighter. The house was a blank canvas. And now, the real fun could begin. It was time to bring me back into my home. With the house cleared of all of Dean's belongings, I felt a surge of creative energy I hadn't felt in months. This wasn't just about redecorating, it was about reclaiming my identity, my taste, my very essence, which had been slowly buried under a pile of gray pillows and sports magazines. I went on a shopping spree. But it wasn't frantic or impulsive. It was deliberate. Every single item I bought was something I loved, something Dean would have rolled his eyes at. First to go was his sterile, uncomfortable black leather sofa. I sold it online in 20 minutes to a college student who was thrilled with the deal. In its place, I bought a gigantic, cozy sectional sofa in a deep emerald green velvet. It was soft and inviting, big enough to curl up on with a book and a blanket. His sad, minimalist metal coffee table was replaced by a beautiful, reclaimed wood table I found at a local artisan market. It was warm and had character. It had stories in its grain. On it, I placed a stack of art books and a vase I filled with bright, cheerful sunflowers. The walls were next. I took down the framed posters of grim-looking action movie heroes and replaced them with vibrant, abstract paintings from local artists. I painted the accent wall in the living room a warm, sunny yellow. It instantly changed the entire feel of the space. The bedroom underwent the biggest transformation. The heavy, blackout curtains he insisted on were replaced with light, airy linen ones that let the morning sun stream in. I took down the weird, geometric metal art thing he had hung over the bed and replaced it with a large, beautiful macrame wall hanging I'd been admiring for months. I bought a new duvet cover in a floral pattern, new pillows that were actually comfortable, and a soft, plush rug for the floor. I spent the rest of Saturday putting everything together. I had music playing, the windows were open, and the fresh air was circulating through the house. It started to smell like me again, like lemon polish and fresh flowers and possibility. By the time I was done, the house was transformed. It was no longer a showroom for a sad, beige life. It was a fortress of glorious, unapologetic womanhood. It was my home again. It was warm, it was colorful, it was mine. And there was just one more thing I needed to make it truly perfect. My final and most brilliant move happened on Saturday afternoon. With the house feeling so wonderfully, liberatingly empty, I realized there was a different kind of void I wanted to fill. Not with a person, but with a presence. A loyal, loving, non-judgmental presence. I drove to the local animal shelter, telling myself I was just looking. I walked past the cages, my heart aching for every pair of sad eyes that looked back at me. I saw big dogs, small dogs, energetic dogs, sleepy dogs. And then I saw her. In the very last kennel, a giant, fluffy creature lifted her massive head. She was a Bernese mountain dog, with a beautiful tricolor coat and the kindest, gentlest eyes I had ever seen. Her little information card said her name was Daisy, she was 2 years old, and her previous owners had to surrender her when they moved into an apartment that didn't allow large breeds. She didn't bark. She just sat there and thumped her tail softly against the concrete floor. I asked to meet her. The moment they let her into the little visiting yard, she walked right up to me, leaned her entire body against my legs, and looked up at me as if to say, "Well, it's about time you got here." An hour later, I was driving home with a 110-pound ball of fur and love in my backseat. Daisy was not a small dog. She was a furry, drooling, lovable wrecking ball of pure joy. When we got home, she explored every room with a quiet confidence. She sniffed every corner, her tail wagging the entire time. Then, she walked over to the new emerald green sofa, hopped up, circled 3 times, and fell asleep, snoring like a lumberjack. She had claimed the house, and my heart, as her own. I spent the rest of the weekend playing fetch with Daisy in the backyard, drinking wine from the bottle in my own living room, and changing all the passwords. The new Wi-Fi network was named Pay Your Own Bills, and the password was Not Your Wife LOL. On Sunday evening, I sat on my gorgeous new sofa with Daisy's giant head in my lap, her soft snores filling the quiet house. The storm was coming. Dean was due back any time. But for the first time in a very long time, I felt completely, utterly prepared. I wasn't alone. I had my fortress. And I had my queen. Sunday night rolled around, thick and quiet. I had made myself a nice dinner, something Dean would never eat, and was curled up on the sofa with Daisy, watching an old movie. Around 9 p.m., my phone buzzed with a notification from my video doorbell. There he was. The camera showed Dean strolling up to my front door, looking tan from his weekend at the lake, humming to himself. The comedy began almost immediately. He stuck his key in the lock. It slid in, but it didn't turn. The new deadbolt I'd had installed that morning was doing its job beautifully. He jiggled it, a look of mild annoyance on his face. He tried it again, with more force. Nothing. He let out an exasperated sigh and started banging on the door. From the couch, Daisy lifted her massive head, let out a deep, rumbling woof, and then promptly went back to sleep. She was utterly unbothered. Then my phone started buzzing. It was Dean. I watched it vibrate on the coffee table next to me, took a calm sip of my wine, and hit decline. He called again. Declined. This cycle repeated 5 times. The banging on the door got louder, more frantic. "Val! Open the door! What is wrong with you?" I remained silent. This was all part of the show. This was his opening scene, and I was letting him have the stage all to himself. After another 5 minutes of increasingly desperate pounding, he seemed to give up. The doorbell camera showed him pacing on the porch, running his hands through his hair in frustration. He looked confused, angry, and honestly, a little pathetic. And then, right on cue, a porch light flickered on next door. It was Mr. Henderson, in his housecoat, holding a watering can even though it was pitch black outside. "Showtime," I whispered to Daisy, who just snored in response. The first act of our little play was about to begin, and I had the best seat in the house. "Oh, Dean, dear, is that you?" Mr. Henderson called out, his voice a perfect blend of surprise and neighborly concern. He shuffled to the edge of his porch, peering over the railing. "Mr. Henderson, thank God," Dean said, rushing over to the edge of my porch. He was clearly relieved to see a familiar face. "I can't get in. My key isn't working. Is Val home? I can see the lights on." Mr. Henderson nodded sagely, taking a long, dramatic pause. "Oh, Valerie's home," he said, his voice full of warmth. "She's had the most wonderful weekend. A real transformation." "Transformation? What are you talking about?" Dean asked, his voice laced with confusion. Mr. Henderson leaned on his railing conspiratorially, lowering his voice as if sharing a juicy secret. "Well, she told me the good news," he said. "She said you two aren't married. She said she doesn't get a say in anything you do, so she decided to celebrate her newfound freedom." Dean just stared, his mouth hanging open. "She redecorated the whole house." Mr. Henderson continued, barely containing his glee. "It's a woman's home now," she said. "Very vibrant." The look on Dean's face was a masterpiece of disbelief and dawning horror. "And the best part," Mr. Henderson added, delivering the line with the flourish of a true thespian. "She got a dog. A great big beautiful girl named Daisy." He paused for effect. "She said she wanted a companion who was loyal and didn't talk back." "Isn't that sweet?" That was the line that did it. I could see the exact moment the information processed in Dean's brain. He slowly turned and peered through my living room window. From my vantage point on the couch, I saw his face pressed against the glass, his eyes wide. He took in the scene. The emerald green sofa, the colorful art, the warm lighting, and the giant, snoring Bernese mountain dog occupying the spot where his leather monstrosity used to be. He let out a sound that was somewhere between a scream and a sob. It was the sound of a reality he thought he controlled completely shattering before his very eyes. The performance had been a stunning success. And now, it was time for the grand finale. After seeing the inside of the house, Dean whipped out his phone and started texting me, a furious barrage of digital screaming. My phone lit up with a novel's worth of angry, all-caps messages. "What did you do? Where is my stuff? Let me in right now." That's when I decided to respond. I let him stew for another minute, watching his frantic pacing on the doorbell cam. Then, I picked up my phone and typed a single, simple text message. "You said to stop acting like we're married. You said I don't get a say. I agree. This is my house, and you don't get a say in how I live in it." I continued typing. "Since we're not married, I've returned your non-marital property to a secure location. The address is 123, Storage Way, Unit 42. The code is 1-2-3-4. You have 1 month. Have a great life." I then blocked his number. And his social media. And everything else. A complete and total digital amputation. The doorbell camera showed him reading the text. He looked at his phone. He looked at the window. He looked back at his phone. Then he let out a scream of pure, unadulterated rage and threw his phone onto my lawn. It bounced on the soft grass with a pathetic little thud. It was a truly spectacular meltdown. He ranted and raved for another 10 minutes, pacing and kicking at the air, before his chariot arrived, Sterling, pulling up in his beat-up sedan to rescue his fallen king. Watching him finally get in that car and drive away, I didn't feel angry or sad. I just felt quiet. The show was over. The curtain had fallen. And in the silence, all I could hear was the gentle, rhythmic snores of the beautiful dog sleeping at my side. That sight, the sight of him completely losing control on the lawn that used to be ours, that was the moment I knew I was truly free. It was a long road to get here, and I know many of you might understand that feeling. If you're still listening, please help me by liking this video and commenting the number 1 below. It lets me know you're here with me, and that you've been a part of this whole journey. Your support is a huge, incredible encouragement for me to keep sharing. Please, comment the number 1, and listen while I tell you the rest of the story. The day after what I now call the Great Lockout, the expected social media campaign began. It was pathetic, but also predictable. Dean and the brothers started posting vague, dramatic stories on their Instagram accounts. There were sad black and white selfies, song lyrics about betrayal, and posts about the importance of cutting out toxic energy, which was ironic coming from them. They were trying to paint me as the villain, the crazy ex-girlfriend who kicked her loving boyfriend out for no reason. It was all so generic, it was almost funny. They were using a paint-by-numbers kit for victimhood. I let them go on for about 2 days, watching the little pockets of sympathy form from people who didn't know the full story. Then, I decided it was time to provide some much-needed context. I didn't engage with them directly. I didn't sink to their level. Instead, I made a post on my own private social media page, visible only to our mutual friends. It was a simple photo album. The first picture was of my living room from a month ago, the cold leather sofa, the sad gray pillows, the general aura of a dentist's waiting room. The caption read, simply, before. The second picture was my living room now, the glorious emerald green sofa, the colorful rug, the warm lighting, and right in the middle of it all, Daisy the Bernese mountain dog, sprawled out and looking majestic. The caption read, after. The final picture was a selfie of me and Daisy on the couch. We were both beaming. I looked happier and more relaxed than I had in years. The caption for this one was simple, but it said everything that needed to be said. Decided to redecorate based on my new relationship status. It was brought to my attention that I'm not married and don't get a say in things, so I'm embracing my freedom. Hashtag no say no stay, hashtag dog is my co-pilot, hashtag bachelor pad no more. The post was a nuclear bomb. The sheer, unadulterated pettiness of it, combined with the undeniable cuteness of Daisy, was a winning combination. My friends found it hilarious. The story, now with the proper context, spread like wildfire. People who had initially offered sympathy to Dean were now seeing the full picture. The narrative was no longer psycho girlfriend kicks boyfriend out. It was girlfriend tells boyfriend their relationship is a joke, is shocked when he believes her. Dean's friends went silent. It's hard to maintain a victim narrative when the supposed villain is posting adorable pictures with her giant, fluffy dog. The aftermath for Dean was, from what I heard, pretty rough. He crashed on Sterling's couch, but that apparently lasted less than a week. I guess Sterling's girlfriend wasn't too thrilled about a permanent, non-paying guest who complained all the time. He ended up having to move back in with his parents in a town 3 hours away. He did try to come after me legally. I received a threatening letter from a lawyer demanding access to the house to retrieve his wrongfully held property and demanding financial compensation for being made homeless. My lawyer, a wonderful woman named Sarah, found this absolutely hilarious. She responded with a very polite package containing a copy of my mortgage statement, a copy of the utility bills in my name, and a friendly inquiry as to whether Dean would be paying me back for the 6 months of rent, utilities, and food he had consumed while living in my home as a non-married person with no obligations. We never heard from his lawyer again. The funniest part of this whole ordeal came about a month ago. I was at the dog park with Daisy. She was happily chasing a tennis ball, and I was just enjoying the sunshine. A man approached me hesitantly. It was Clayton, the third member of the brothers. He looked incredibly awkward. "Hey, Valerie," he said. "Look, I wanted to say I'm sorry about that night at your house. We were out of line." I just shrugged. Dean said what he said. I just took him at his word. "Yeah, I know," he said, shaking his head. "He's a lot. He called me last week complaining that his parents are making him get a real job. Said it was all your fault for ruining his life." He paused and then looked at Daisy, who was now trying to fit 3 tennis balls in her mouth at once. "Honestly," he said with a small smile, "it looks like you're doing just fine." And he was right. I am doing just fine. The house is no longer a beige prison. It's my home. And Daisy is the best roommate I've ever had. She's loyal, she's funny, and she never complains about my cooking. I learned a valuable lesson from all this. Sometimes the best revenge isn't some grand, complicated scheme. It's just listening to what people say and believing them. Dean told me exactly who he was and what our relationship meant to him. I just decided to agree with him. He said I didn't get a say. And now, in his life, I truly don't. And in my life, he doesn't either. And that, combined with a giant, drooling dog, is a pretty happy ending. Thank you all for listening. It really means the world.